How did your drinking start? Because mine started, I think, quite normally. If there's such a thing as starting normally. I experimented a little bit at school. Well, not school, but school years, 14, 15, had a few cans of beer people used to borrow from the parents. And I used to drink a little bit of home brew, which my parents made. My dad used to brew this home brewed lager, which is really good. And my first drink, I think, was about 13, we went to holiday camp. And me and my dad went to this club place. And I had a pint of Guinness. I thought, wow, it tastes quite nice, this. By 3 or 4 pints in, which is quite a lot for a 13-year-old, I felt really mellow. Quite a shy child. Had a bit of bullying, that sort of thing. I thought, well, I quite like this. And my mind sort of cottoned onto that this was quite nice. As I said, let's experiment a little bit. 14, 15, 16. I started work. I wanted to stay on at school. I was pretty bright, but my parents wanted me to get a trade or something like that. Anyway, I went to electronics factory. They wanted me to get the electronics background, which was the big thing in the early 80s, electronics and that sort of thing. But I didn't really like it. So my routine was to go there, do a bit of study, a couple of days a week, college, that sort of thing. I always went to Newcastle and had a few drinks after the college. And so it was a mate of mine, Keith, who's now died, unfortunately. We used to go after the college and just bunk off, really. Have a few drinks. But he never became a problem drinker. So I did that for 4 years, and I joined the police service. He was in Northumbria, and I moved eventually to the Met Police. I was in South London, where I met a lot of seasoned drinkers, older people, older in service, especially who could drink for England. And I, by then, had quite a high tolerance to booze. So I used to go with them. After a lot of shifts, I was still driving in and out of work. I still had a couple of pints, not too much. And I'd get the train sometimes back where I lived. But I was still just steady, in my eyes steady. But I always had a couple of drinks after work as well, as in at home. So it was a stash at home. No wine and spirits, just lagers and things. And I found myself sort of having a drink every night, really. And then I got promoted quite quickly, and I moved to central London, and we moved house to Epping. Now Epping was on the central line on the underground, which was ideal for me because I didn't have to drive. And I worked in the West End of London. Great place to work. Social life was magnificent for a heavy drinker. By then I was a heavy drinker in my mid to late 20s. And most days we went for a drink after work. After earlies, we used to finish 2:30, have a couple of drinks before we went home. Often on a late turn, finish 10:30, run over to the pub in Soho and have a couple of drinks then before we got the underground back home. Not everybody did that, but a lot of us did. And you get into, birds of a feather flock together, don't they? In a bit of a crowd, and we had a few drinks, and one thing led to another. So we ended up going to a club sometimes, all this sort of thing. And domestics started getting out of hand. Settled that down a little bit, but I knew I was still drinking heavily, but it didn't seem to bother me. I enjoyed my job. I used to get hangovers, but not serious hangovers. I was really fit. And that went on for a couple of years. I didn't have any children at that point. But the marriage wasn't the best, but that's a different story. But I still used to enjoy our work. I used to enjoy a drink. And I noticed that over time, my hangovers were getting a little bit worse. I was still laying in bed a little bit longer. It was taking me a little bit longer to recover. And on my days off, when I was home alone, just me and the dog, I would go out very early, as in 11 o'clock, and drink all day, on and off. And sometimes you can get the train up to the West End and wander around Mayfair and so on. It's very expensive when I look back, how much it cost me, but I like the bright lights, I like the pubs, I like the characters. And I became a character myself in the boozers, to be fair. And then when I was 31, my daughter came along. Now everything changed then, because I couldn't just lie in bed and recover. So I had quite a stressful job. Well, not stressful, long hours. And then I was also looking after my daughter. So I wasn't getting much recovery time. Because as a heavy drinker, you know you need a bit of relax, don't you? There's nothing better than having 12 hours to lie in bed and recover. And I noticed that I was getting less and less sleep. I was getting more irritable. And to get over that was having another drink. So I became an even heavier drinker. And I sort of kept that steady, as it were. I didn't have any problems at work or anything. I wasn't taking sick leave. But I noticed I was taking the odd day annual leave when I didn't feel too clever. When I had like 3 or 4 days on the sauce. So a bit of tiredness, a bit of stress, a bit of alcohol, and maybe I was taking some more alcohol to try and relieve the stress. But I didn't consider myself an alcoholic at that point. Although we did go to the doctors. She sort of dragged me by the ear, my ex-wife, and said, you must go to the doctors. The doctor said, well, the way you are, you're physically fit, but obviously you're drinking too much. Because doctors will always say that. They always say you drink too much. And I thought, well, I'll try and cut it down a little bit, which I did for a couple of days. And I thought, no, I still like the boozer. I'll go on the West End, have a few drinks on my day off, and I didn't have my daughter to look after. And I was still pretty free, but not as free as I used to be, with time and recovery. And then it got a bit worse, the drinking. I was taking a bit more time off. Not particularly silly, but just juggling time. I was doing overtime and putting in for time. And I knew how to schedule myself so I'd be sober and have good times when I was still fit and healthy. So interspersed with a little bit of binging. I went on for a few more years. And I knew I had a problem, but I didn't see it as a serious problem. I had friends who drank more than me. And this is a bit of a trap we can get into by thinking, well, I'm not as bad as him because I'm not drinking a bottle of whiskey every day. I'm just having a few pints, and a few pints is normalised, isn't it, in society? Just a few pints. Just have a couple of pints. And that's how we get into trouble, isn't it? Even now I see people in my hometown up north and I think, God, he looks a bit rough. And I say, oh, Steve, remember me? It's John. Oh, hello, John. I've seen you for 40 years. Fancy a pint? First thing people say, fancy a pint. So my drinking progressed from there. Then I, when she retired, split with my wife and I was on my own. And that was the time to, not party time, but I thought, well, I'm free now. I'll just start and do what I'd always done, that's to drink. And at that point, I started drinking quite a lot more. I think being on my own, the big change of lifestyle, moving from the south to the north, back to the north, which I didn't particularly relish, but I was sort of there. And then I had this, obviously split with my partner, and didn't see my daughter very much, this sort of thing. Big change of life, and I started drinking a bit more, and a bit more, and a bit more. And I was having a few problems. And I remember one night I woke up, my parents were at the door, and the caretaker of the block of flats I was in, because I was collapsed behind the door. Too much booze, obviously. And got myself sorted out and I went to the doctors. It didn't give me anything the first time. It just said, slow down. So I slowed down a bit, tapered off, what I thought was tapering off, and I just stopped. I had a seizure. Oh, that was so frightening. From then on, I got some diazepam, and I came off the booze for a year or two. And I didn't have any cravings really. I quite enjoyed being off it. I thought, I've got my life back now. I felt a bit fitter, looked a bit better, had a few more pound notes in my pocket, as it were. And I thought, well, this is all right. This I don't mind being off. And then suddenly I thought, oh, actually, I feel quite good. I'll just try one again, because life, it's been my life drinking. A lot of you are in the same boat. It's a social life, isn't it? It's everywhere. So I started doing that again. Within a very short time, I realised I was really suffering with these hangovers again. Even though I'd only been off for like a year or two, I thought, well, that's caught up with me really quick. So I'd go back to get some more diazepam. That happened 3 times, sorry. And I was on and off a little bit. I didn't realise anything about these withdrawals particularly. I didn't do any research into it. I just thought it was part of drinking. And then I got really sick of drinking. And so 2006, I decided I'm going to have a real go at this. Moved apartments and I isolated myself a little bit. I got rid of any women in my life or any stresses. And I got really fit. And I was off for 8 years. And I felt fantastic. Looked great. I was fit as a fiddle. And then I relapsed because I met this girl who said, oh, it's pity you didn't drink. I thought, well, I must be all right with 1 or 2, and shouldn't go back to the doctors if I get any trouble with it. So I started drinking 1 or 2. Within about 6 weeks, I was really, really ill with the booze. And that was 2014. Went back to the doctors. Can I have some diazepam, please? No. You're going to get addicted to it. I thought, what are you talking about? I was shocked, completely shocked about, well, why can't I have this medication? I get addicted to it. So I made an appointment to see another doctor. No, it's not the policy here anymore. You have to go to this community hub place. I went there, well, I just couldn't face going there anymore. And I started drink and I was just self-medicating. I couldn't get any medication. So my medicine was the booze. So self-medication was my cans of Stella, basically. I more or less shut myself off. I was getting loads of cans delivered. I had massive, massive problems with anxiety and this sort of thing. And then a couple of years later, after that, I was getting really, really thin. I had a lot of muscle mass. I was feeling ill all the time. I was coughing up bile. It's a terrible, terrible story from then on. And I realised I was a broken man, really. And it broke me quite quickly. So from that last period of 8 years sobriety, as soon as I hit the booze again, I wasn't the same person. And eventually in 2019, I had major problems with what they said was liver failure, basically, decompensated liver cirrhosis, and ascites fluid, and various other things. And I was in intensive care. I was in that hospital for 2.5 years. And amazingly, the decompensated liver disease turned into compensated. I don't have any symptoms anymore. My blood pressure's good. Got no issues there. I was very fit, as I said, when I was younger. And I feel pretty good. And my blood tests always come back okay now. Because I haven't had a drink for nearly 6 years. And the only way to combat this and to get well is to not have a drink and look after yourself. That's all you got to do. Look after yourself. Remember those 3 words. Look after yourself. Because I was a broken man. Completely and utterly down as far as I could get. With horrendous withdrawals, seizures, injuries, depression, the whole lot. Accidents. Burned myself. There's so many things going on. I could write a book 10 times. I've already written a book, 1 book. I could write 10 books a week on the problems that I had with that all. And, and you've got to realise that it will take you down very, very quickly. Very quickly. So no matter where you start with the booze, you're always going to end up in a much worse place unless you can stop it. If you do enjoy these videos, then please like and subscribe and share them. I've got an ebook out as well. And please support the channel. There's a buy me a coffee link in there. Because the more people that support the channel, the more we can do with the channel. And the more people we can help as a group. I'll speak to you soon.